Welcome back everyone to Data Science for Everyone. Today we're going to be talking about rendering and committing with React. Let's get started. So continuing our discussion about React components, we need to think about before our components are displayed on the screen. Now they must be rendered by React in order to do so. Understanding the steps of this process is going to help you think about how your code executes and explain its behavior better. So what are we going to learn today? Well, we're going to be understanding what rendering means in React, when and why React renders a component, and the steps involved in displaying a component on the screen, and why rendering does not always produce a DOM update. So imagine that we're wanting to build up a nice React component, okay? But now this takes into account a process of requesting and serving up the UI in 3 different steps. So first we have a triggering. Now we're going to trigger a render, and this is basically kind of setting everything up. Okay, so this is delivering your request. Okay, then the next part we have here is rendering the component, and this is preparing the render itself. And finally we have committing to the DOM, and this is actually placing our image. So let's do this out in each step. First step here is we have the trigger. Okay, and there are 2 reasons for a component to render. Now, one, it's the component's initial render. So it's the first thing that's going to be happening. And the second thing is the component's state has been updated. Okay, or at least one of its ancestors has. So let's set up an initial render, all right? So when your app starts, you need to trigger the initial render. And we have frameworks and sandboxes that sometimes hide this code in the background, but it's done by calling the create root with our target DOM node, and then calling its render method with a component. So let's go on and make this up. So let's do import image from, and we'll assume that we have some image.js file. We haven't made that up yet, but we will. And then let's import create root from React, React DOM/client. Okay, and we're going to const root here, create root, and we're going to use document.get element by ID here, and we're going to say root. Now here we're going to do root.render, and here we're going to put in some put in our image. Okay, now let's go on and make up our image. All right, so this will be, we'll call this image.js. And inside of here, we're going to actually put in and export out our function called image. It's not, image. It's not going to take in anything. And it's going to return here an image tag, and I actually don't need that. All right, and what's going to go on here, we're going to have an src here, and this is going to be, again, I'm just going to use a picture of my my favorite here is Bob Ross. All right, and we're also going to create up some alt text here, and this is going to be Bob Ross painting mountains and trees near a lake. Okay. And so if we have this running, and we see here that we have this .app wasn't found, let's actually refresh this to make sure that things are going the way we want them to. All right, and then let's go back and let's fix what's going on here. Okay, so Again, here, we'll notice here we are not actually exporting anything. And actually here I kind of did something a little bit silly here. Again, notice I put this in the app.js. Now, when we are wanting to start this up by utilizing this root.image, okay, if we look here, this src folder here has a ton of different applications in here. Now we actually need this, not this image.js, but we need this index.js. And notice in here, it actually has all of this React DOM client stuff that we are doing. Okay, now this is usually, like I said, this is usually done in the background. Okay, that's why in the past versions we've been actually putting them everything in our app.js where the rendering has been done in the background. Well, so what we're going to do, we're going to cut all of this out from our app.js. We can leave it blank. We don't need it right now. Leave our image and let's go over to our index and let's paste everything over on top. And now we can go back over and look, we have our rendering here. All right. So again, make sure that when you run this, particularly when you're using the create React app, okay, you're putting this code today inside of the index.js file, which again, you can go and click here, ignore the app.js. Okay, and you may need to delete it because there's sometimes a ton of code in there at the beginning. Okay, and let's see if it actually overwrites. I'll undo everything in there. All right, let's see if it overwrites anything. No, it's not actually overwriting anything right now. Okay, so you can leave and just ignore the app.js. Okay, and then go directly over to the index and run this. Now, what would happen though if we commented out this root.render image? Okay, so let's comment it out. And notice here it's not using either of these things. Let's go back over and notice our render has disappeared. Okay, so so if I go back over here and I put it in, oh, there it goes, it pops back into existence. Now, the next thing we're wanting to talk about is re-renders when a state updates. Now, once a component has initially rendered, okay, you can trigger further renders by updating its state with the set function. Now, updating your component's state automatically queues a render. So let's actually go about this. So what kind of happens here is we have a state update, then it's going to trigger, which is what we just talked about, and then it's going to render. Now, React renders are components, all right? Now, after we trigger a render, React calls your your component to figure out kind of what needs to be displayed on the screen. Rendering is React calling our components. Now, on our initial render, React is going to use the root component, okay, which is what we have over here. Okay, and so for subsequent renders though, React will call the function component whose state update triggered the render. Okay, so we have here, let's maybe change this up, okay, to something else here. Let's change this up to, oops. Let's change this to maybe something like gallery, okay, and then this needs to change to gallery, and then I'll change this one as well to gallery, and let's create up a new file. We'll save this. Whoops, I did not mean to save it as that. Let me go over here. Let me just delete it. It's easier just to delete it. Go back over here. Let's create up a new file. Let's save. This is going to be gallery.js. Okay. And what we're going to have inside of our index, again, we have gallery. And these are going to match up to gallery. And so now we can go back over to our gallery function, our gallery file here, and we can export default function, and here we're going to say gallery. It's not going to take anything, and it's going to return here. In here, let's call this our div. And what instead we're going to do is say h1, here a gallery of Bob Ross. And now we can actually go through and use our image. Okay. And in this instance, we can also go on and import this as well. Okay. So we can go here, and again, you could also put it inside if you wanted to, but we'll just do import image from image. Okay. And we'll go back over and notice now we have a gallery where we have 3 Bob Rosses. And again, you could put them in as many as you want. Now, what's happening here? So during the initial render, okay, React will create the DOM nodes for our div. Oh, and let me go back over here so we can see them. It will create our div. It'll create our h1. And then it will take and create up our image tag. Okay. Now, during the re-render, though, React will calculate which of these properties have changed since the previous render. Now, it won't do anything with that information until the next step, and that is the commit phase. So now let's talk about how React commits changes to the DOM. Now, after rendering or calling our components, React is going to modify the DOM. Now, for the initial render, React is going to use the append child DOM API to put all the DOM nodes it has from the screen. Okay, and then React is basically only changes the DOM nodes if there's a difference between renders. So for example, we could have, maybe you have an image coming up and you're going to set it up to go in every few seconds. Okay, and it keeps going, and again, each time it renders, it's going to add in maybe another Bob Ross every time it goes in. Now, you could also do this if you wanted to add in some sort of text or you wanted to update some values. And again, you would have it re-render as this goes. So what we've actually talked about today is how React happens in basically 3 stages. So how the screen updates within React. And it does this with a trigger, a render, and a commit. Now, if we ever have any issues, you can always use strict mode to find your mistakes in your components. And React does not touch the DOM if the render result is the same as the last time. So again, as long as nothing changes in your render, React isn't going to do anything whatsoever. So if you like this and you want more of this content, please comment, subscribe, and hit that like button, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.